Interesting. So basically, Arcana Network is a storage layer built on top of Ethereum, which has a stack for privacy, specifically for DApps on EVM compatible chains. We have learned a lot about EVM chains, EVM compatibility, privacy stack, and that's and also storage layer, the storage part that we have been discussing about since quite a long time now. So that's exactly what Arcana does, and I'll give you a quick glimpse about what are we going to learn today. Little changes. We are going to exactly learn how this works. आवाज नहीं आ रही है? Is my voice okay? Type yes in the chat quickly. Yes, yes. I'm just logging in from different location today, so probably you might hear some white noise as well. Loud and clear. Perfect. That's perfect moment to start. Arvind, are we good to go? Is my voice and audio okay? Let's quickly check.
Hey, yes.
Perfect. I think people will love if you would start with how did you move to Web3 and then with your introduction, and basically that's how we can move forward.
Sure. Are we good to go in terms of centering the screen and having permissions to share?
Yeah, we're good to go. You can try sharing the screen now.
Got it. So one moment.
Till the time Arvind shares his screen, folks.
Just a few minutes to get set up.
Yeah. Just type welcome in the chat for Arvind. Welcome Arvind in the chat quickly. His first time meeting the community that we have garnered over the last 6 to 7 weeks. So probably let's begin with now. Perfect. Yeah, Arvind, over to you.
Just going to need another minute. I'm not able to find the window to share. Should be a minute now.
Welcome. Swagatam. Oh, a lot of Hindi there. Welcome to gang. Hello everyone and welcome. Where is everybody logging in from? If you can type your city location quickly, it'll be fun to know. Oh, work from home. Kerala, Bangalore, Siliguri, Punjab, Delhi, Dubai, Australia, Bihar, Navi Mumbai, Bhubanesh. What are these locations? I mean, such a diverse crowd do we have today. From Dubai to Siliguri to Mumbai to Kerala, somebody wrote work from home in the middle.
Can you guys see my screen?
It says you have started your screen sharing, but still your screen is not visible yet.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can.
But I'm guessing you're able to see the presenter slides too.
Yeah, if you can go to the first slide and probably click on slideshow, that should work. Yeah. Perfect. Good to go.
I lost my speaker notes. Let me try again. Great. I hope it's still visible to everybody.
Yes, it's clearly visible. Yeah, now it looks good.
And this is why I hate Google Slides.
We figured it out. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks everybody for coming today. I mean, I understand it's like the 5th week of your session and it takes a lot to be retained for this long. And it's also a Sunday evening, but pleasure to see all of you. So today we want to talk about future of creator economy in Web3, specifically how did the uh, creator economy evolve over time, what defines creator economy, and how does it get impacted in Web3, and what tools are offered so that whether as a consumer or as a creator, you can leverage this, right? So today's session was supposed to be done by my co-founder Mayur, but unfortunately he had to attend to some other family emergency. So I'm stepping in to do this. So before we start, to introduce myself, I am Arvind, one of the co-founders at Arcana Network. I like to say this that I was in Web3 before it was called Web3, right? So this was back in 2017, 18, where not many use cases were around. Ethereum itself was very new and people did not know what was the potential. But we have been tinkering around certain tools, hackathons, etc., try to build consumer-focused apps to really dive in and see what opportunities there are. And that's how we got started in 2019 to help devs onboard users and manage their app's data layer, like Home mentioned, right? So we do storage, we have a privacy stack to essentially help you onboard users with just their email ID, without the friction of MetaMask, etc., and store data, encrypt it, and define permissions on how this data can be accessed by others, right? Since then, we have raised about around $2.5 million, a team of over 30 people, mostly remote. And yeah, if anybody, if you're building anything interesting, we'd love to chat after this. So quickly to get started, this is a quote that I personally like of all the quotes that people have said about Web3 and creator economy, right? And the reason is that I believe creators are especially important for Web3 because they have the reach to a wider audience than any other use case that Web3 or crypto can enable, right? And this means that a large number of people can really participate and see what value blockchain itself can offer them. And Tim Draper has very nicely captured it here, where it says it'll be the Web3 creators who will rebuild the global economy and take us into a beautiful, decentralized, free and trusting world, right? Sounds like a manifesto, but I truly believe that this is possible. Now, to set some numbers around, will this rebuilding of global economy even make an impact if, let's say, Web3 and creator economy really flourished, right? So if you look at the numbers currently standing, the market size for creator economy is around $104 billion. Now, this can vary a bit depending on how you define creator economy, because there is no one standard definition, and this spans across different categories. So whether you include a category or not could widely skew this, but let's say it's about $100 billion. And what's more surprising is that over 1 billion people self-identify themselves as creators, right? So this goes beyond just your popular YouTubers or TikTok or Instagrammers, right? So these could be, let's say, a person who works for a movie company and is a scriptwriter, and they sell a template on how to write a story, right? On a marketplace where they sell it for $10 a PDF or a book, right? Or it could be someone who takes classes on weekends on how to do calligraphy, right? So these are very niche people also who identify as creators. And it's not a trivial amount of time that consumers or fans spend. Globally, they spend about 7 hours a day consuming content that these creators put out. And what's more surprising is that in Latin America, that's about 15 hours a day, right? I guess there could be some correlation between like a country's GDP and how much they spend on platforms. But this is a huge chunk of time that people spend, almost as much as a full working week of about 48 hours. So before we dive into the creator economy itself, I would like us to go through how did it evolve. I've broken it down into these 3 phases. One is a transition from industrial to consumer economy. The second is a transition from consumer to a creative economy. And lastly, we have the transition from a creative to a creator economy. So the difference here is subtle, but it is important to understand. I'll dive into what these are individually right now. And so if you look at industrial to consumer economy, this is clearly marked by this phase where during the industrial revolution, now we had lots of machinery that could create goods through automation, And for the first time in history, we had surplus of goods, right? So scarcity was no longer a limiting factor, but there was a new challenge that customers would buy whatever the market offered, right? So this meant that the market should capitalize on this, and just the old way of being limited by resources weren't good enough. So then you had a new category of roles and skill set being sought after, like people like salesmen, marketers, people well versed with mass media, were all these new roles that started cropping up. And this also led to a cultural industry for design, print, publishing, media, audiovisual, and cinematography, so that these brands could compete with each other in a creative way. Now, the side effect of this was that creators then ended up being bound to corporations because they couldn't grow their own audience, right? They had to go through these corporations to sell to the consumers. The second stage is like from consumer to creative. And this was roughly started from around the 90s, where creativity itself was until then thought of as this nice to have intangible benefit to products or teams. Right? Only from this point on, it was considered as a tangible asset that could in fact create wealth for both employees and employers. Right? And then we had the discovery of design, writing, audio, video content, etc., that could directly be monetized and generate revenue for businesses. However, this also still served the creativity and not the creators themselves, because the tools only served you to make better creative content and not so much as to help you reach more people or monetize it better or even own your audience, right? So it still served the creativity itself and not the people behind this creativity. And this is where we are today, right? We are transitioned from a creative to a creator economy. And this was largely kickstarted by the marketplaces and the tech platforms that we have today, like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And this was the first time where creators added fans instead of consumers, right? And this is a very important distinction. Consumers are passive. They consume the artifacts that are put out by these corporations and brands, and typically they are faceless, right? And you do not know who are the people behind this. And it has a very streamlined, structured approach of what is an acceptable outcome from these corporations because of their guidelines. And this also meant that if you're adding fans, you could really customize to what your personality is and what the audience wants, and you're not limited by market size, right? You could create content that is just for maybe 20, 30 people, at least to start off with, and don't have to justify to anybody why like a program should be run. And we see this where there are upcoming indie channels that put out very interesting content that later takes off, but would have probably been initially rejected by these media houses because they don't deem them viable. Now, while creators can now own fans and cater to their specific needs, there are still some fundamental problems that are broken, which are a result of the mechanics of the platform itself. Right? So if you have to look at what's broken, let's say from OnlyFans to TikTok to social networks, these may give creators access to communities, but these creators are what really drive traffic to these platforms, right? And this is purely due to the strength of their content. And we see this where a new social network comes up, they poach creators from other platforms to create content. So when Microsoft wanted to compete with Twitch, they started getting the top grossing creators to start streaming on their platform instead. Now, whether they worked out or not is a separate take, but at least it shows that the creators are extremely valuable for these platforms. They are the real revenue drivers. But if you look at the relationship between a creator and their community, it is always intermediated by the third party, which is the platform. Now, this impacts into fundamental ways. One is the extent to which the creator is fully rewarded because they are the middlemen and they want to take their cut. And second, it also impacts the type of content that these creators make, so that you do not want to go against the algorithm. You do not want to violate the platform's terms, the conditions. and you want to do what the majority of the platform likes as opposed to what your specific user base wants, right? So to give a very recent example, Instagram announced that they will be deprioritizing photos and pushing more for videos. Now, their claim is that this is what most people want, and hence that's how they're going to optimize their platform going forward. But if you're an artist who primarily does artwork as images, right? You might not have much to do with video and you prefer not doing video, but you're not being prevented from fully exploring your creative side in the image format because the platform is now moving in another direction, right? So it dictates what sort of content that you create. So if we had to define what is a Web3/creator economy look like, there are couple of keywords here. One is it allows you to create an independent and open economy. Open economy means that the forms of exchange are not just limited to the platform, and they can move between different ecosystems, whether they're different blockchains, different business models, or different platforms themselves, right? And second is who can contribute to the decisions that are involved in these platforms, whether it's the business model or whether it's about revenues or about algorithms or how feeds are prioritized or features to be launched, etc. Who are the participants whose decisions are not just heard but ultimately implemented? Right? The second part that's important is it's about co-owning it with your fans and directly monetizing it without a third party, right? So I'll go over this as the pillars of Web3. There are a bunch more that you can talk about and say, this is what the pillar should be, but I've essentially boiled it down to three things that if you're looking to create a platform, you should try to build in, without which you will not get the benefits that you wanted in moving, say, your creator product to Web3, right? One is try to avoid being the middleman as much as possible between the creators and fans. So this includes around what, say, acceptable content or what should be the rules of engagement, etc. There are some that are not permissible by law, which of course most platforms allow you to prevent. But these go beyond that in terms of, say, politics, religion, science, and other politics that may be politically correct, politically incorrect, or what you think the platform should do versus what the creators themselves want to do, right? You want to create maybe cringe videos, but creators want to put out educational content. You should not be deciding what gets preference over that. The second is about ownership, right? 100% ownership for data, brand, and work. Ownership of data means that you not just own the IP to your data, but also the licensing rights and what you can do with that data. If you have ever signed up to a platform as a creator, in the terms and conditions, you will see that in some form or the other, they will say you explicitly grant them license to reuse your work without having to notify you globally and irrevocable, right? Now, while they might not outright own your work, but if they're able to use it, that still means that there's some agency taken away from you as a creator, right? The second one on brand and work means if there are certain things that you don't like, being able to voice them and being able to do what's right by your brand and not being tied down by the platform's rules, which are typically enforced through lock-in mechanisms where, let's say, it's hard to export a video, or your audience are not transferable from one platform to another, right? These are all lock-in mechanisms that networks use to build their value, but it becomes a deterrent when you want to move, right? Whether it's a YouTube change or an Instagram change, or in the case of like TikTok, when it got shut down in India, lots of creators essentially lost their brand and work. The third is around transparency. Now, we are mostly used to brands and platforms telling both sides, right? Whether they're a creator or the fan, of what the platform does, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. And not only in terms of the kind of work they put out, but also how can you monetize it, right? Some platforms actively disincentivize you or penalize you if you have sponsored content in your ads. This comes because either they have their own monetization mechanisms that they want you to follow, or they have future plans for monetizing your content and do not want you to figuring out things yourself, right? They might even prevent you adding links to your description, or wanting to say this is a sponsored content and not enforcing it correctly, right? So these are transparent in Web3, not just because of the ethos, but because most of these rules have to be written in smart contract and hence by default are public, and the code has to be open source, right? As a result, since there are no centralized teams that make these decisions and it is enforced through code and code is public, you end up being transparent about how things work, and people can then have a voice and say, we should move from this mechanism to this mechanism, which is more fair and equitable. To sort of drill this down, let's do a thought exercise, right? I mean, this is not so much a thought exercise because social tokens are already existing, but let's take the example of this. Now, imagine you could create without limits, right? And this is the claimed benefit of social tokens. Now, suppose blockchain powered fan tokens are deployed on perhaps a Polygon or Ethereum. Now, if you look at the benefits of what they do, they can be used as a reward for fans in return for their engagement. So this encourages the fans to engage with all sorts of content that these creators put out. And not only would this perhaps help in growing the community, but they can also be used as a medium of exchange, right? Now, fans can directly compensate the creators for work that they like. And then this also puts together a mini economy that effectively cuts out the middleman from the equation. This would mean that the creators would have to perhaps tokenize themselves and allow the fans to have a stake in what they do. But there could be a caveat, right? Now, as it stands today, social tokens are a very small slice of a creator's primary source of income. So creators then tend to be very downside focused, right, in how they look at monetizing their fans via Web3, because nobody wants angry fans who have lost tons of money and blowing up their comment section, and it has happened before. This would also lead to some questions that you might have to think. Firstly, what does it mean to even tokenize yourself, right? And do you risk raising the bar for the pressure that you have to perform and create? Because there are tons of incidents where creators are burning out and struggling to meet the demands of their followers because there is so much competition from others that they have to constantly keep putting out content, fresh content with new ideas before losing their fan base, right? But I think there is a definite benefit here where, despite all of these issues, the creator economy still is evolving. So it's too early to figure out what does a social token mean and what are the legalities around it, etc. But it's in the right direction where there is real stake for both the creator and the fan that is engaging with themselves. So this is a creator economy map that was put together by Antler and Speed Invest. And I think this pretty much captures the current landscape in Web3 today, right? So on one side, you have direct monetization, and on the other side, you have creator tools. So if you had to dive into each of them, on your direct monetization, you have community tokens, content, music, play to earn, NFT marketplaces, and Metaverse, right? On creator tools, you have tools to help with fan interaction, design, payments, management, low code or no code. I'll pick a couple of them to walk through what they mean, because there are some that are obvious, like say NFT marketplaces. There are some that could be a little convoluted. What does fan interactions mean, or play to earn mean, for example, right? So with the community tokens, there are a bunch. The most popular one that comes to my mind is perhaps CrowdPad. What happens is you can launch social tokens or have tokens involved in the interaction between the creators and fans and allow them to have an upside in the creators' growth. This also essentially means that you do not have to figure out how token economics fundamentally work or how blockchain works, etc. But you just click a bunch of buttons, you figure out what the design of the experience for your fans should be, and you're quickly able to launch these tokens and use them on whatever platform that you want to do, right? The second is around play to earn, and we have heard a lot about the most popular one like Axie Infinity, etc. And the goal here is to allow NFTs and in-game assets that you create either by buying or minting that is needed to play the game to be traded, because these assets either take money or they take effort, right? And effort also has a value associated with it. And the second way as creators you can participate in this play to earn is because they are typically games. You can then sell ad space either as a developer or as someone, say, hosting a particular real estate within the game. You can sell ad space. You can design what this ad space should look like. It could be a house, it could be a banner. You can design the clothes and the avatars that these NFTs would be storing. And you can design how perhaps the gaming guild should work within this play to earn. How do they interact? How do they exchange information? What are the rules for renting, buying, and the tools around all these to enable it, right? Metaverse, there's been a bunch that's already said about what the metaverse means, but from a very creator's perspective, what metaverses are tending to be are these open ecosystems that are like land that are not created already by the platform, right? So today, Facebook launches a metaverse, they would probably already have a lot of the properties built out. They would have perhaps a Facebook cafe, they would have a stadium, etc. But in the Web3 metaverse, a lot of this is left to the creators, right? So you buy property and you develop it and you give it the identity and the utility that you see fit. And this can either be through a brand or it can be an individual, right? And then you have a vibrant ecosystem of marketplaces where creators are, say, perhaps making virtual furniture, virtual movies, virtual parties. And we've already seen tons of artists do live performances, right? And these artists would perhaps need a setup that needs to be designed, flyers being put out, and all of these are being done by independent people who are participating. Music is another exciting part of the creator economy, because it is sort of relooking not just the business models of music, but around the IP of music itself and what it means to own music, right? So one example is there are apps like Dropstar, P&T, or Sonomo, where artists can create their music as NFTs, and you can, one or more people can own it, and then there are a bunch of people who can stream it, and the owners can also get a cut out of the music revenue that the artist gets, right? And the second benefit is there is lots of transparency around the royalties that are paid to artists. Today, it's not very uncommon to hear of how some artists have been cheated and lost a lot of money, or perhaps don't even end up having the rights to their own music because of the monopolistic behaviors these record labels and studios deploy in bringing these artists on board, right? But if it is on chain through Web3, we have complete transparency around how the rights have propagated, how the media has been consumed, and how many plays it has received, and how much revenue was collected through this, and how much you should subsequently get. And most of these are even automated, that you don't even need to be audited for you to get what you're due. So one thing that stands out across all of these use cases is how NFTs are standing out as a key to make all of this happen, right? So I'd like to dive into what do NFTs enable without going into the differences of the contract, etc. Because there have been a bunch of sessions that you probably attended about NFTs, right? No, I'm not going to talk about collectibles, right? Which are like, say, your Bored Apes, etc. No, they might also have a creator spin, but they're primarily collections that, say, Yuga Labs puts out. But I want to look at the other couple of segments, which are games, metaverses, and utilities. Now, they have about 13% market share, right? Now, this is more than it used to be. So while it is small, it is a growing segment where bulk of the economy will run when it comes to NFTs, right? We are already seeing collectibles uh, losing their steam. There are 2, 3 major collectibles that have all the market share, and rest are almost like vaporware with no utilization, right? So this 13% will now soon be the larger chunk of the NFT market. So if you have to reimagine engagement through NFTs, uh, firstly, they've redefined what it means for the art world, right? We are already at a place where almost 2.3 billion is the value of all the NFT assets that exist in crypto for artists. But more than art, there are other bunch of categories that it enables, specifically NFTs as utility tokens or social tokens for fan engagement, right? So they clearly have defined intrinsic value on top of the usual scarcity that these collections propagate, right? So beyond just it being scarce, there's real utility in this because it belongs to a creator, and the creator has intrinsic utility with his or her fan base. If you have to categorize what sorts of utility is possible on sorry, I'm just facing a glitch. Yeah. Correct. So this can be either for your community, for fantasy sports, gambling, gaming, or social, right? And it's important to understand how do you design them, because for each use case, the same NFT model and economics might not work. Now, if, let's say we take blockchain-based games and in-game NFTs as an example, right? So game developers in Web3 not only have to worry about building a good game, but also have to create a good enough financial incentive to support this robust and sustainable in-game economy, right? Is the gameplay captivating? Does the in-game mechanic make sense? And are the NFTs functional as opposed to just being collectibles, right? And the game also has to be really good. Now, while NFTs can be leveraged to do a new model for fan engagement, and sort of reconcile this virtual asset with a real world example, it still leads to some friction in being able to do that, right? And we see it with like Axie Infinity, where it sort of looks like a Ponzi pyramid scheme where you need new entrants in the marketplace to constantly keep adding value to the tokens, because people don't typically play it for the fun of the game itself, right? They get hired because they know, okay, if you put in $100 worth of NFTs, you get this much as a scholar or as a gamer, and that's sort of your income to sustain, right? Irrespective of how the game is good or not, you just do it and grind it out. So this is where, if you relook, you would have to think of, okay, firstly, the game has to be good. Then what other benefits can these NFTs offer beyond just being played the game, right? This is one word that comes up, which I personally am not a fan of, but seems to be being picked up widely, called the phygital experience, right? So phygital is a combination of physical plus digital, right? Now, NFTs can be tied to real world perks. Now, if you're a musician, that could mean, say, a lifetime supply of concert tickets or VIP meet and greets. And as an artist, a select number of prints in your collection that you put out, while ensuring that only those collections are going to the right fans, are not being misused, right? And then these fans can then attest that it belongs to them. They've held it for so long. They've supported an artist or a gamer in the early days when not many people believed in them. And then you can really tailor curated experiences for these early supporters. And all of this information is on chain. You don't need to build a tech stack to keep track of all of this or use any particular platform, right? And this is especially useful now as we come out of the pandemic. People are craving more and new novel experiences with their artists, whether it's launching a Gary Vee launching his V Friends conference, or EDM artist performing at Decentralized, or a brand launching a shoe in the metaverse, right? And so it's perhaps a combination of both, that tech is allowing you to build new experiences, and people are also perhaps fatigued from the existing way they have been experiencing products from brands. But there is still a shortcoming with these NFTs, especially in the creator economy. This is from the conversation that I've had the chance to have with multiple artists and brands and platforms that are trying to sell to these brands as Web3 creator platforms, right? One is they come from a place of skepticism, right? This is because whatever is created as NFTs today is public by default. To understand what this means, we'll have to look at first, how do NFTs get minted today, right? So you have an upload file, which is typically stored on IPFS. You get this URL. You mention this URL in this configuration called, say, a metadata, which defines the various attributes of this NFT. And then you upload this to IPFS again. Then you deploy the NFT contract. And then you mention this metadata URI, and then you mint the NFT. So now what you have is basically an NFT that points to a file on IPFS, which has all the attributes about this NFT. And anybody who has used IPFS knows that if you have this URI, you can directly go and access that URL, right? You don't really need to own the NFT to access that. So what the NFT acts is just as a pointer to this hash or this URI. What this means is, as a brand or as a creator, you can't really put content that is valuable that only fans need to own, right? Because if everybody can see it, then what difference does it make if you're a fan or not? While this is okay for collectibles, because the ownership of the NFT also matters and not just the image, but for other things that you create, now let's say you put out a podcast on how to raise your first $1 million, or you write a script, a template, or you create a plugin for AR, generating AR VR filters, right? These are valuable IP that saves time for the buyer or a fan that you want only the buyer to own after paying for it, right? So you would stay away from creating it as an NFT and just follow the traditional Web2 model. There is one fix to do this called token gating. It's not yet widely popular, primarily because what token gating does is it says creators create content, and say people who own this NFTs are allowed to access this, right? So then me as a audience or a fan would go to this URL, say, yes, I own this NFT, and then this server would then authenticate me and show me the file. So you still end up having to centralize some parts of it. So what happens if the server goes down, right? And then, or what happens if the content stored on the server changes, right? So that sort of breaks the second point around the Web3 economy that we mentioned, which is you own 100% of your data, work, and brand. And if you had one takeaway from how we are seeing NFTs evolve, is towards something called as private NFTs. These are also interchangeably called as secret NFTs. And what private NFTs essentially ensure is that only the owner of the NFT can access the valuable content that is stored, while still having some information that is public that sort of tells you a bit about what is this NFT, what are its attributes, what is it used for, etc. Right? And there are 4 parts to it. So the token, the public image, the metadata, and the file. Now, the public image and metadata anybody can see, but the file only the owner of the NFT can access. And in fact, this is one of the features that we are building at Arcana, where we allow people to, any developer, to build platforms where creators can mint these private NFTs, irrespective of whatever chain these NFTs are on. And you point to a file that's stored on Arcana that can be again resolved by everybody who owns the particular NFT, right? So you don't need to go to a URL and visit it, either on our Explorer, or the application itself can just check if you own the NFT and decrypt it. And if you sell the NFT, the new person gets NFT, and the data is tightly coupled with the NFT itself, instead of just checking whether you own an NFT and gives access to it, right? Now, why is this important? This is more in tune with how things work in the real life, right? People need control for both public as well as exclusive access. And this means that optionality is essential for anybody creating content. And as human psychology, if you think about it, the power to exclude also adds value, right? If you can read articles without buying a subscription, you are less likely to do it, right? And if it was easy to pirate, people would perhaps do that as well, because is yet no strict IP protection when it comes to is it okay to copy a file from an IPFS hash versus buying the NFT and seeing it, right? Because both are essentially public already. So I would want to end this session sharing my bits on what are the opportunities and trends. No, these are not like bullish projections for this is token, you should bet on this token or this use case, but more along what social change could happen over the coming years with Web3 and the creator economy. Right. One is, instead of seeing new audience being captured in Web3, more likely tools will be built to translate engagement from Web2 to Web3. And this would mean that existing Web3 tools would interface with whether it's Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, like we see with, say, Instagram allowing you to now sell NFTs, right? Or Mask Network that allows you to overlay buttons and actions that you can take on your existing Facebook or Twitter feed, right? So these are interfaces where you don't need to leave the existing Web2 platform, but Web3 comes to Web2. Right? And I think this will have a profound impact because making people switch networks is pretty hard. The second is something that we earlier touched upon, that there is a lot of burnout in the creator economy today because the most frequent touch point for engagement with the creator is the content that they produce, right? So this means that the more content you create, the more touch points that people have, and logically they need to create more content if you need more touch points with your audience, right? But what Web3 does is it allows you to have additional touch points beyond just the content, right? Whether it's, say, voting on what you should do next, or staking the tokens that you've created, or participating in some gamification with the NFTs that you have created. There are other avenues that fans can engage with beyond just, say, watching your video or resharing it, right? So this means that you can go at a slower pace and avoid burnout while keeping up the quality that you are expected to have, right? The third is boosting the metaverse adoption. So games that have in-game assets that are harder to claim or buy see more involvement, right? And we see this whether it's Fortnite or Call of Duty or other games where assets, the term that the younger generation likes to call is just grinding it out to get the skins that you want, etc. Right? The problem with metaverse is while games have tried to move, the tech is still pretty bad, right? It's very low on realism. It's riddled with bugs. And this is even from brands that are building very highly engineered products, like whether it's Oculus, Vive, or etc. Right? While VR and AR slowly evolves, what Web3 allows you to do or will impact it is people will end up overlooking the tech or being okay with its shortcomings, because beyond just the experience of the metaverse, now they have a vested interest in participating in its economy, right? And typically when there is a strong incentive, people are okay with people and consumers or users are okay with participating, even if the experience of doing so is not that great, right? So let's say there is a platform that gives you remote jobs, might be riddled with bugs, but if you are looking for a freelance gig, you might overlook it and still try to make that platform work, even if it takes longer, etc. Right? And I think this will really help in how Metaverse gets adopted, because it also gives a lot of younger platform devs the money that they need to compete with the big players like, say, Facebook, etc. Have tons of capital to deploy and build it. But if the younger teams are able to build more innovative token models for the creators who participate, while the tech is catching up, they would have a fighting chance with these bigger players, right? And as Metaverse tech itself, more VCs would be interested in funding it because there are people and usage is growing and there is economic activity growing. So then marketplaces can be built, revenue can be generated beyond just ads, etc. And then it sort of leads to this cycle of should the tech be first or should usage be first? And this sort of dog foods and allows users to come first while the tech evolves. The final, and I think this is the most impactful, is it's not rewarding for just the 1%. So today, if you look at how money gets split, the top creators make bulk of the revenue, right? And 77% of these creators also rely majorly on brand deals for their income. And this also means that they have to tiptoe around what the brands like, right? Being family friendly or being appropriate for a certain age or catering to the current political stance of what is right to say and not, right? And this also means you're bound by the seasonality of the brand's spending. Not everybody spends throughout the year, right? With Web3, what we'll see is more creators making more than what they used to, because they have more monetization opportunities beyond just ads and brand deals that end up going only to the top creators, right? So this expands the pie instead of cutting out from an already pre-existing fixed pie and not necessarily having to redistribute it, but expands it so that there is more available that then goes to the middle of the tier creators that we have. So with that, we come to the end of this session and hope you guys enjoyed and liked what we did. Some parts could be technical, but if any of this interests you, if you're interested in building or just want to chat, I'm on Twitter and email. Feel free to get in touch, and thank you.
Perfect. I think it was a wonderful deep dive into understanding how creator economy looks like and what are the specifically the tools part, because we have been going through tools a lot very recently. Arvind, just one question to begin with. Can you give us some examples of some creator tokens that you have saw personally, or some that built on Arcana? Can you give us some quick examples so that we have certain context on exact these are the people who we should look up to, let's say, for references?
Yeah, I think there have been a couple. So none on Arcana at the moment because we are not a layer one, right? We allow people to build on any chain they want, launch their token on that particular chain. So we are more like the infra that can be used to allow you to build out certain features.
Got it. But where do you draw your references when you think about these creator economy projects? Any such people that you follow or any projects that you are, following personally?
There was this one, because I wanted to give this example, but it ended up being a rug pull of sorts and bad incentives. So I don't want to bring up that example. If you remember, there was this token that Instagram creators could claim, and it said, this creators tokens are worth this much. I'm not able to recall the name.
BitCloud.
Right. So I had high hopes for that model to go. I think they did certain things right, more things wrong, but I think with lesser or more ethical growth loops, something along those lines. The second is artists creating not necessarily social tokens, but tokens as part of the early music they release to identify who are their early supporters. And I think his name is RJ, a pretty popular music artist, did this where he put out private after parties just for these early fans at all of the conferences that they do.
Got it. Perfect. And any such differences? I think you spoke about a few already, but any such differences that you saw or you're seeing at this point, specifically in terms of creator economy, that creators in Web2 are not leveraging, or it can be the 1 or 2 points that could be more helpful in the Web3 space specifically?
What they're not leveraging, I would say NFTs. So there is still some skepticism around social tokens because it's so unclear of what that means. But I would say NFTs, at least from a audience capturing perspective. So what Web3 for a Web2 creator can allow is tokenize what they've already produced, right? Now, what this means is you can create a market for content that you have pushed out beyond just the relationship that you have with your fans, right? So let's say I create a blog and it's based on subscription versus I create a blog that are NFTs and there are say 200 blogs, right? Now, after I've read the blog, I could perhaps resell that NFT so that someone else can buy it, right? Maybe I don't mind waiting a day to read by buying these from the secondary. Now, of course, the UX has to be improved to make it very seamless in terms of gas, setting up wallets, etc. But there's a huge secondary market for the direct interactions that you have that is perhaps not explored. Now, depending on who you speak to, they say, why can't this be done on Web2? Why does it need Web3, etc.? But I think it's still worth an experiment to figure out, what if most of the stuff that you create also has a secondary market associated with it.
Got it. Raman has a question. How does the platform developer earn revenue if the platform is neither ad-driven nor collects subscription charges for the platform usage? Do they take a cut from the creators in form of tokens, or how should we go about that?
Yeah. So there are two ways you can look at it, right? So one is you can directly take a percentage out of the transactions that happen. The key difference, however, is how big is this cut, right? So YouTube takes anywhere between 30 to 60%, right? But in Web3, most platforms take anywhere between 2.5 to 7.5, maybe 8%, right? So that's almost 90 to 30 to 90% reduction in how much you charge. So that itself is one good win, right? And these, so far, at least the models have shown that this is enough to sustain these platforms. OpenSea makes anywhere between 500 to 800 million a year in just the 2.5% that they charge for the transactions. The second is the revenue doesn't perhaps directly go to the protocol, but goes to the holders of the token, right? And this is how one of the competitors of OpenSea called LooksRare does, where their entire proposition is that we don't even charge this 2.5% directly to the platform. Instead, this goes to the holders of the token, and we as platform creators also own certain percentage of this token supply, and are hence entitled to this revenue, right? So I might, as LooksRare, own 20% of the supply, and the rest are owned by either the sellers or the buyers or token holders, and the revenue gets split amongst all of us. And this allows people to stake, get rewards, participate in the protocol and the platform. And this also gives incentives for developers to build better products. That means that their tokens earn more percentage of the revenue as the platform grows.
I think one of the viewers is interested to know what are your top 3 Web3 products or services that you personally use or interact.
Top 3. OpenSea, primarily because just to keep tabs on upcoming artists, not actively to buy. Second, a bunch of DGen DeFi protocols, not to make money, but to primarily just look at and explore new token models that come up. And third, I would say Mask Network. It's a Chrome extension that you install. Then you can tip people. You can do very Web3 native stuff on your Facebook, etc. So that's something that I think is fun, and also something that end up using day by day. On the work front, there are a bunch of tools that we use. Most popular ones, mostly revolving around managing your custody of tokens, etc., like Argent, Gnosis, multisig wallets, etc. But this like boring stuff that I'm sure most people don't want to know.
Yeah. Okay. Vamsi has a question. Can a platform pay in fiat currency for the creator's contribution? And second, what are your opinions on using no-code tools like Bubble for building a Web3 platform?
So if you look at, so I'll take the second part, right, which is no-code tools like Bubble. If you look at the stack of products, front end could be on anything. Right now, you could try to decentralize the front end too, where you host it, and then you put on a decentralized CDN to serve these files, etc. But there's really no need to think of decentralizing the front end itself, or at least at the moment, right? So what matters is the logic that powers your product decentralized enough, and who can control that, right? So in that case, yes, you can definitely use Bubble. There are also Web3 native tools. I think there is one in the presentation that I listed. Let me just bring them up. Called Beyond, right? And what Beyond does is you use existing platforms, but you add automations on top that are Web3 native, whether it's for managing communities or token getting certain website links, assigning some roles, or publishing some blogs specifically for them, right? And these are run on existing tools like Discord, right? So totally okay to. So let me just stop my screen. Yeah. Right. So these are totally okay to be run on the centralized platforms. When it comes to paying in fiat, this is still a debate. And we personally, as Arcana, have decided to make it easy to allow people to pay with fiat because for multiple reasons. One being your customers don't want to be speculators of token price, right? So they want to be able to predict how much they spend in infra or services month on month and not leave to the open market to decide. The way you can do it is you price it in fiat, convert it into crypto, and then allow them to be paid out to these creators. So I think of it more as a tooling choice rather than a platform choice. So the platform could be built with payments in crypto and use tooling on top of it that allows you to convert these back into crypto, right? The second that would go into making this decision is why does the platform need crypto payments in the first place, right? How important is the token model to its incentive mechanism? Can it make do with maybe just using Ethereum, right? Does it need to have its own token? And second is what regions does it serve and how easy is it to on-ramp people from fiat to crypto, right? So I think that trail of pure crypto payments will always be there because lots of users want to use just crypto without disclosing their identity. But allowing fiat is extremely important. It's already possible today. There are lots of on-ramp solutions that platforms just instinctively embed because they realize that not everybody who comes has crypto and wallet set up, that they need to convert fiat to crypto at least to get started.
Got it. And I think we have a following question on the monetization part of the platform. If a decentralized platform just charges, let's say, 2 to 9% of commission, I think from a user perspective, from a person who is using it, not the creator, it's why can't YouTube do the same thing if it faces competition? And what edge does a decentralized platform have over YouTube from a platform perspective, and let's say from a user perspective, and not from the creator POV?
Got it. That's actually a pretty elaborate answer to give, but I think So firstly, I think it boils down to incentives. Second, it boils down to the cost of running it, right? Uh, if you're primarily driven by ads, the economics of it are not very lucrative, right? So you need to hit a certain scale until which you have to front run a lot of these costs. And that means when you do become profitable, you need to charge a higher rate so that you not only become profitable from that day, but also sort of recouping the lost opportunity of not having made money all these years ago, right? Uh, with taking a lower cut, you are one, have cash flow from day one, and second, you're not the sole owner of all of the infra that's needed to run these systems, right? So you could, for storage, use another ecosystem. For streaming, you could use another ecosystem. For logins, you could use another ecosystem. For transactions, you use another ecosystem. So, and that's the benefit of being in Web3, right? You don't have to recreate a lot of these uh, infra that exists to launch an app. You use the existing tooling that's already there, and similar to how open source works, right? So you take an existing code base, you improve it, and you contribute back to it, right? And then this code base becomes more popular, even though it's free, versus something that's proprietary that people take 5-10 years to build, whether it's a database or a notification service or a messaging protocol, right? So similarly, infra keeps getting better, it gets done in public, and the cost to acquire them goes down. So then you don't need 30%, you're okay with just 2.5%. The second of why can't they do it is intention. Uh, if you see throughout history, right, any sort of marketplace model, whether it's digital or offline, say real estate, middlemen want to maximize how much they make, right? So the equilibrium ends up being around 30%. Like if you think of government as a middleman that collects tax, right? Tons of studies say that 35% is the sweet spot, 35 to 40%, beyond which your economic output starts going down, where people will not work as much because they feel they're not getting enough for what they put in. So I think that one, it's an equilibrium that people have assigned. If that equilibrium ended up being 60%, they'll probably take 60%.
Got it. I think next question is about Arcana. We'll take last two questions.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a use case of a DApp built with Arcana to understand Arcana ecosystem better as a storage layer?
Sure. So one, our auth is meant for essentially any application that tends to target or attract non-Web3 native users, right? Say, think of games, NFT marketplaces, consumer apps that are built in Web3, where people might come perhaps without a MetaMask, right? So they need to be able to log in and get wallets with just their email ID. So you enter your email, get a link, click on that link, and you're logged in, and there's a wallet created for you that's non-custodial that you can fetch anytime, right? So very Web2 login experience for Web3. On the storage side, two examples. Let's say you want to build a decentralized Dropbox, right? So that means there are files that are public, that anybody can access. There are files that only you can access, and there are files that are shared perhaps with your friends, colleagues, or some other organization, right? Let's say a client, right? And these policies and permissions you can define through our smart contracts and say this address can only download this file 10 times or until X date. And this address, this wallet cannot edit this file, cannot reshare this file, or cannot delete this file, right? And this file is only visible to the owner, which is myself. Another example, let's say you want to build a decentralized Instagram, right? That means you need a concept of a user. You need them to say, these are photos that are private to me. These are photos that my followers can see. These are photos that anybody who are perhaps not even logged into Instagram can see. And these are photos that only my close friends can see, right? Or a subset of it, or people who also follow me, people that I also follow back can see, right? So you need all these complex access rules that today are hard to do in Web3 without building a server, right? So this comes under the branch of like doing key management and access control well. So we have tried to decentralize that so you can build really rich consumer apps and these workflows for how data gets shared, all of these between these open networks in Web3. And of course, we want to build more such tools to help devs perhaps do notifications better, store database, do messaging well, etc. Anything that allows them to build like more performant and feature-rich applications.
Got it. One last question. And this again, revolves around Arcana. Is there any knowledge base sort of a thing or academy where people can get onto the platform, learn first, and then start building? Any such links for people to access that you can share, which we can forward, or any such reference docs that you could probably share with us?
Yeah, our docs are extremely easy to do. It takes about 20-30 minutes to integrate them. Go on docs.arcana.network and everything is there. We have ready-made templates that you can just download and copy and get started. We're also on Discord where our team is available all the time to answer any questions, to personal demos, because community is extremely important in the space. So unlike a SaaS company where you have to book a demo and wait for their sales team to get back, here you can just directly reach out to us, or either us or even one of our community members will answer your questions because they're aware of the product works. But yeah, docs.arcana.network is the best place.
Got it. And just ending today's speech. First of all, guys, drop your comments. How was the session? So that we can conclude it. And Arvind, any advice for people? Any advice for people who are building stuff? There are 51 people on the call, and we recently saw there are close to 100 people who are actually building stuff over Web3. When they started, most of them do not know what Web3 is, what's DeFi, what's DApp, the blockchain and how it works. Now they have already started building stuff. They have started exploring the ideas and looking at what they want to do. Any suggestions or any pep talk probably that you can give, because that what we have saw is that has helped, because I think we all have moved from the generation of Web 2 to Web 3 now. How would you tell them to look at it from this lens?
So I think one, balance optimism with healthy skepticism, because when we started, it was right in the middle of a bear market, right, in 2019. And there was lots of uncertainty. While we believed in the movement, we didn't tie ourselves to a particular chain, right, or a tech. For example, we were building on EOS and realized that EOS as a community is dying, innovation is not happening, it's time to move. Now, we still believed in concept of blockchain and layer ones, but did not believe in the bet of EOS as a tech, right? So you need to have healthy pragmatism in what specific vertical within the space you're working on, while knowing that it will take time. If not EOS, it will be Polygon or someone else, but there will be a dominant layer one that replaces Web 2, right? So at least that should be clear. And second is just stay in the game in whatever capacity. If you decide that maybe the use case you've built is not working out as well, or some parts are too complex to build, just stay in the game. Don't go back to Web 2. Freelance, participate in a DAO. And remote is the go-to way of working in the space. So there are tons of companies that you can work remotely for. Join hackathons, do bounties, apply for grants. And these are also reasonable grants, right? Between 5 to 20K, enough to sustain teams. And just, like I said, just stay in the game and you will eventually figure out. And there are so many problems that are not solved that if there are, say, X number of problems to solve in Web2 space, in SaaS, consumer, etc., there are probably 20X problems to be solved in Web3. The market might not seem like it yet, but lots of toolings are absent in the space. So there's definite opportunity, just a function of time.
Got it. Thank you so much, Arvind, for joining us today. I hope you liked it as well. And yeah, thank you so much all for joining. We wish you a very good night today. It's a Sunday evening, so probably all folks are excited to learn what's going on in the space. Almost at the end, we probably have one more session for the 6-week program. And once again, thank you so much, Arvind, for joining us. Uh,
Thank you, guys.